Good evening. I'm the founder and CEO of California Forever. We're building a new city in the North Bay. You might have seen it in the news a little bit. What I'll try to do here is just tell you a little bit about where this came from, what are we actually building there, and then I'll geek out a little bit on the details of the urban plan that we just submitted this week, if that's all right. So the first reaction that everyone has to you building a new city is you're really doing it in California, and people are puzzled by it, not so much in this room, but generally elsewhere in the world. And I think, to me, California is very much fighting for. I think this was a pretty controversial opinion about 4 or 5 years ago. It was pretty brutal to be raising money for a company to build a city in California in 2020 when everyone was living to Texas and Florida. But this has since then changed. And to me, it really started with growing up with the vision of California as this. And so I grew up in post-Soviet Eastern Europe, and to me, California was this place of optimism and opportunity that could basically do anything. And then I got here in 2013, and I learned that this was this. And I'd gotten here about 20 years too late for the California that I wanted to live in. And for a little while, I got pretty depressed about that reality, but then decided to work on it. And I think people ask kind of where did this idea come from? And I think sometimes and it happened to me, when you live in a place and in a system for long enough, you kind of accept the reality of how it is. And that happens with homelessness, right? The first week when you move to San Francisco, you kind of really puzzled by it. And 5 years in, you're a veteran and you're like, this is how it goes. But I think to me, it was the shock of coming in with this expectation of what it would be and what it could be, and seeing it that really drove it. And so I started the company in 2016, and since then, what we've done is we've put together this land holding that you can see out here in a place called Solano County, which you can think of as being at the edge of the Bay Area, or you can think of it as being in the middle of what has now become the Northern California mega region. And so it's either at the very edge of it, and when people get snobby about it, they say it's in the middle of nowhere. But that depends entirely on your frame of reference. In this area that you can see on the map here, there's 12 million people who live here. If this was a state, it would be the 7th largest state in America. And the property is right in the middle of it. It's about 69,000 acres. That's about 2.5 times the size of San Francisco. You can kind of see it if you look at San Francisco on the map. It's about 5 times the size of Manhattan. It's this open land. It's used for grazing. One of the reasons for why we really like the idea of building there is on this entire area, which is by my estimate, 5,000 square miles, it is the worst piece of land for agriculture by official government reports that you could find. It is also the least diverse, ecologically valuable piece of land that you can find on this whole map. And so if we're going to build anywhere in Northern California, this is exactly where we should be building. The government actually has reports that rank places by ecological diversity on a score from 1 to 13. This is the only area on this whole map that you can see that has a ranking of 0. 0. It's been basically grazed down. Nothing native has survived that ever was there, and so it is exactly where we should be building in an abundant world. For a while, there was a common misconception that this is Jan's crazy idea that has absolutely 0 reasons and 0 background in regional planning, and I'm happy to report that is not the case. In 1958, the Federal Commerce Department did a study called The Future Development of the San Francisco Bay Area. Interestingly enough, they looked at it for between 1960 and 2020. It comes out in this series of bound maps. And this is the land use map in 1958. And basically the orange is urban development. The red is industrial. You can still see the orchards in Santa Clara. And this site is what we own, this large area. You can see there's no cities there. Travis Air Force Base is already there. That's there still today. This is the 2020 map. And if you look at the 2020 map, what that shows is this is where we're putting our downtown. It is a remarkable piece of, and we didn't put it there because they put it there in 1958. We put it there because it happens to be the best place to put it there when you think about the site. And so it's remarkable that before computers with a bunch of very basic tools, the Army Corps and the Commerce Department did a study that actually quite correctly forecasted this. By the way, the houses in Fairfield and Suisun end exactly here. If you look through those maps, there's a remarkable amount that they got right, including the timing. If you looked at the 2000 map, there was no development here that they projected in 2000. They even correctly predicted that by about 2010, 2020, we would be running out of land to build on in the core Bay Area, and we would need some places to expand. I like this one even more. So this is the Regional Plan 1970 to 1990, issued by ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, which is a very respected, depends who you ask, but today it's a very respected body in the Bay Area. And what I love is that in it, they called for new communities. The government should foster and assist in the development of entirely new planned communities, They should contain at least 100,000 people. They should provide employment, and they should have a balance. And then here they talk about how we should prevent scatterization and unimaginative development by basically forcing development to occur at a larger scale in certain parts of the Bay Area. If you look at the regional plan from ABAC from 1970 to 1990, so the cities are basically orange, and then industry, I think, is purple. And then the place that they suggested should be open space is dark green. But then you have this kind of hashed light green areas. They call that controlled development. And in it, they basically said, this is exactly where we should be putting growth anywhere in the Bay Area. And if you look at where is by far the largest area for controlled development in the Bay Area by a factor of like 5, it's in southeastern Solano County, and this is basically the property we own. And so there's fundamental geological, soil quality, environmental quality, location reasons for why this is a good place where we should be building. Now, great cities have a reason for being, and ours is pretty simple. We want to build the most walkable city in America in 100 years, and we want to build a place where California can again build physical things. This is a state that was defined by the aerospace industry, the space industry, shipbuilding. We built 1,500 ships in the Bay during the war, and we've lost that, and we think that's a real shame. We also think that there is a need for a place like this because it complements the existing ecosystem in the Bay Area. And so we dream up new stuff in places like Berkeley and San Francisco, and we design it in Silicon Valley. But right now we build it in Texas, and we think that's a really, really dumb idea for a variety of reasons. Number one, it's a dumb idea because it gets the middle class in California. Number two, it's a dumb idea because if you're trying to compete and if you're trying to invent the future, it's a really stupid idea that every time your engineer needs to get to the factory, they get on a plane and they fly to Ohio, which is a 3-day trip. It would be a lot better if they could get in a car in Palo Alto in the morning, go see the factory, and come back the same day. You all know that China is winning. It's pretty staggering. They produce 55% of global ships, 80% of consumer drones, 90% of solar panels. And our proposition is that you can't win and you can't compete if you can't co-locate production and R&D. It's really, really hard when you have the ecosystems that work in China, whether it's Shenzhen or Guangzhou or others, work because you can actually co-locate R&D and production. And we've done the opposite in America. We have all of the R&D in California, whether it's in Hawthorne or whether it's in Silicon Valley, and then we ship these factories all over the place. California done this before. The Hunters Point Shipyard in San Francisco was built in about 15 months. It was a mountain in 1941 when Pearl Harbor was bombed, and it was a fully functioning, one of the largest shipyards in America by about 15 months later. I learned the other day, we built 150 aircraft carriers in 2.5 years during the war. 150. It takes us 10 years to build one right now. It's pretty bad. So what the hell are we actually building there? We are building what we're calling the Solano Foundry, which is an advanced manufacturing zone, and a bunch of neighborhoods on the north part of the site. And then this happens to be one of the best places to build ships in America, believe it or not. And so we're building a shipyard on the southern end of it. And I'll talk a little bit about each of those. For the foundry, the idea is to basically build a place where all of these companies, particularly who are located in Silicon Valley, can locate actual production. And so you have your R&D and you have your software engineering, whether it's in Menlo Park or in San Francisco, but you can actually put a factory there. If you drive there in the morning from Menlo Park, it's about 80 minutes. And so you can very easily get there for the day and you can come back against traffic. It's a little bit unknown how quickly it's going to take for eVTOL to work, but when it does, it's going to be a game changer. If you can be there from Menlo Park in 15 minutes instead of an hour and a half, that opens up a whole new opportunity. And what's interesting about eVTOL is it's actually pretty difficult to refit existing cities to work for them. It's not easy to take existing buildings and turn them into vertiports. But if you're building a city from scratch, you can basically do all of that. Everyone talks about onshoring manufacturing. There's no way that's going to happen by throwing bodies at the problem. You just physically cannot do it. There isn't enough people who can and are willing to work in manufacturing in America. The only way you can do it is by robotics and automation. And if you're going to do that, you're going to need AI talent. Well, 95% of the talent is in the Bay Area. So good luck trying to do that in Ohio with all of the engineering here. One of the big factors that companies say for why they leave California has nothing to do with taxes. Taxes is like number reason 5 or 6. The primary reason is that they've just raised $100 million and they need to get a factory going in 6 months, and they can't do it in California because of permitting. How we deal with that is we basically do all of the permitting upfront. And so we're doing effectively wholesale permitting. We're permitting a city for 400,000 people plus about 45 million square feet of advanced manufacturing space in advance. And what that means is that when you come to us because you've just raised $100 million and you want to build a factory, oh, by the way, if you come to us as a homeowner and you want to build a home, we can give you a permit and you can start construction in 60 or 90 days, or the city will give you a permit. And so you can actually create this envelope by pre-clearing all of the environmental work in advance, which then allows you to actually go very quickly. The land, though it looks to be quite far inland, happens to be on the Sacramento Deepwater Ship Channel, which, believe it or not, there's 650-foot Panamax-class ships that go all the way to Stockton and Port of Sacramento. The ship channel comes all the way to the property. This is the property from the water. Kind of Antioch and Pittsburgh will be behind you here. It happens to be one of the best places to build ships in America. This is an actual figure. It's kind of shocking when you see it. I didn't believe it when I first learned about it 2 years ago. China builds about 1,000 ships a year. We build about 5. And it's getting worse. And so if we're going to do anything about it, it's going to have to be a Manhattan project for shipbuilding if you want. And you'll need scale to do it. Now, here's the bad news. The bad news is there's a shipyard in China called Zhangjiang Island, which is the area in blue, which built more ships last year than the United States has built since the end of the Second World War. One shipyard in China has built more ships in 1 year than we have in 70 years. The good news is that the shipyard looks kind of small when you put it in Solano County. And so the Death Star of Chinese shipbuilding is the blue area. The yellow area is Newport News, which is our biggest shipyard, where we build all of our aircraft carriers and about half of our submarines. The 2 shipyards next to it are the other 2 shipyards where we build the other 50% of our submarines. And so if we're going to build at any kind of reasonable scale, this happens to be probably the only place to do it in America on that scale. We have another problem, which is that most of the shipyards in America, if you look at where they are in the Gulf or they are on the East Coast. I hate to break it to you, but China is that way. And if you need to get the ships from those shipyards into the conflict theater, or you want to bring them back, you need to get them through the Panama Canal. If there's any kind of a conflict in the Pacific, the first thing that you do if you're the Chinese is you bomb or otherwise shut down the Panama Canal. And if you do that, you can't bring the ships back without going around Argentina, which takes 17,000 miles and many, many, many months. And so the problem we have is that not only we don't have enough capacity, we've closed all of the shipyards that existed once in the best natural harbor in America, which is the Bay Area. It was Hunters Point, Mare Island, Treasure Island, Richmond, Marin Ship. I mean, this is the place that built all of the ships because this is the best natural harbor. And so the good news is that, and by the way, we've built all of them into condos. And so you can't go back whether you want to or not, and there's basically nowhere to do it. The good news is there's one site remaining, which is the one that we are working on. Now, this week we reintroduced more refined versions of the plan for the Solano Foundry and for the city. So the last component is a walkable city for about 400,000 people, 175,000 housing units. The goal is to build something that has the density at the lower end of Marina in San Francisco and at the higher end of, say, the West Village or Barcelona, and build into that. We initially introduced the plans in the beginning of 2024 when it was a ballot initiative to do it as an unincorporated community in Solano County. That's the plan on the left. Solano County has a long tradition of saying growth should go in existing cities. And we basically got the feedback of saying, hey, we like the plan, but you should do it in an existing city. Then we can get behind it. And so we've listened to that. And in particular, the city of Suisun, which is this very old city out here, stepped up and invited us to submit the plans to them. And so what we did is we largely kept the plan the same. And then we added what's called here the Travis Protection Zone to connect it to the city. And so now it's going through permitting by the city of Suisun. This is Gabe Metcalf, our head of planning. Many of you know, we just filed those plans about a week ago. The plan is now pretty close to being ready to be built. There's a very detailed plan. It's about 250 pages. I'm going to go through a few aspects of it. We've done the engineering work on infrastructure and grading and water and wastewater and so on. And so it's a pretty complete plan. I'll take you through a few aspects of it right now. We think that at a high level, it's a plan that basically includes almost everything, if not everything, that the YIMBY movement writ large has been advocating for in California for the last 10 years, actually. It has extremely mixed use. What you see here is a downtown in purple at the bottom. We have the Solano Foundry in blue. Between them is an entertainment district that is modeled on places like locally R Street in Sacramento or Fulton Market in Chicago or Meatpacking in New York. And then throughout, what you see in orange are mixed-use neighborhoods. All of these are not really exclusive zones. They are more like flavors. For example, you can build any type of housing in any of those zones, except in the industrial zone. You can build retail in any of them. You can have a bar on the second or third floor in a mixed-use building. It has a form-based code that is extremely permissive. And I'll go through other aspects of the plan. What you see in the middle is a central park that winds around a seasonal creek. It's bigger than Central Park. It's bigger than Golden Gate Park. It's a defining signature move, putting it around the downtown. I said we want to build the most walkable city in America in 100 years. We're pretty serious about it. We spend an extreme amount of time and attention and care and money figuring out how to do that. The plan that we arrived with takes the best of what's a American street grid, combines that with superblocks from Barcelona and Tokyo, and then it layers that onto the Dutch woonnerves. And the way we do that is the streets that you see in blue, basically the equivalents of boulevards. They are movement streets. They are about roughly half a mile to roughly a quarter mile, depending on where you are. They have a lane in the middle that runs transit. That transit could be anything from AVs to buses to trams. It's agnostic to it. The other thing that you can see is a network of greenways, for example, and parks in the middle of there. We'll get to it. This is very inspired, for example, by the Savannah plan in Georgia. The way that we built it up is we have blocks that are about 4 acres. That's pretty standard in places like Chicago. They build up into super blocks, and then 2 super blocks form a neighborhood. The neighborhood is surrounded by these movement streets where you would have transit. That means that basically you are always at most about 5 or 6 minutes away from a transit stop that goes to multiple places in the city. Within the super block, you have these yellow streets are what we call slow streets, which are modeled on these woonnerves in the Netherlands, where basically cars are a guest and you have everyone in the same right of way. You've got about a 10 mile per hour speed limit, so you can get your car to your house if you want to, but your kids should be able to walk to school. We have these greenways, and so you see them in green that route throughout the whole city. The other thing that we have from this is inside each of these super blocks by the plan, you could have a different pattern. And so, for example, if someone like Cul-de-sac wanted to come and build a development here, they could take a whole super block and turn that into a different street grid, including having much more of a European pattern on the streets. Few other moves. This is a neighborhood. We've put the retail at the heart of each of the neighborhoods. And then a pretty big deal is we've put schools at the heart of each of the neighborhoods. So if you look at most new developments in America, we do this annoying thing where we put the school next to the freeway and then everyone has to drive the kids to school. That makes sense if you need to drive them to school. But what we've done is we've put the school in the middle of the whole community, and you can see that we've put it next to a greenway. So the idea is that the kids should be able to use the greenway as a particularly safe place to get to school. This is a pretty typical greenway section. It would cross streets that have cars, but itself, it wouldn't have any. It's a pretty detailed topology of streets. We thought about this a lot. One of the things that we've done in response to feedback from a lot of the urbanist and DMB community actually was that the first version of the plan suffered from everything bagel street, where we kind of try to make it amazing to walk and amazing to have a wide sidewalk and trees and biking and cars and transit. And you end up with these incredibly wide streets because you try to do everything, kind of like we try to do in permitting or anything else. And so this plan has a much more reasonable and narrow range of streets. The idea for transit is that we run these east-west and north-south lines. And what that means is that you are always at most one stop away from being anywhere in the city. You can always get anywhere with one stop. That assumes that you're running these with kind of larger vehicles like buses. If we end up running kind of shared AVs in the middle of those lanes, then obviously you don't have to have a stop at all. You can just use them as basically fast truck lanes. We have provided for external transit. And so the blue line runs east to west, and it would be connecting to what in the beginning would very likely be buses running to places like San Francisco. The purple line is doing the same for places going on 113 towards Davis. Davis is only about 20 miles north of this place, and so it's pretty close to that. With parking, the idea, generally speaking, is that as you get to the middle of the city, it becomes more and more car light and eventually car free in some pockets of the neighborhood. The way we do that is we have a set of garages, which generally speaking are located at the perimeter of the community. And then as you get into the middle of it, there's fewer of them. Now, that assumes that you need a lot of garages. It might be that as we get more and more AV adoption, the number of garages that you need is going to go down. About 33% of the plan is open space, either the Central Park system of parks of all sizes throughout the city. There's also a system of green belts around the city that provides a pretty compact pattern for the development. Last couple of points on infrastructure. We are very proud about the overall environmental performance. For example, on the water question, we have secured water for the full build-out, 400,000 people. It's a combination of water rights. I'm happy to go through it, but we have a bunch of water rights that attach to the existing property. We've then combined it with buying additional ones. There's a large focus on use of the recycled water, but it's not being used for drinking purposes. It's for irrigation, industrial uses. We have built in some of the more ambitious ideas that we'll see whether they work commercially. One of those is a district heat system. And so you may know it, you may not. One of them actually runs in downtown San Francisco, has been running there for about 100 years. We've built that in the plan. And then we've built in things like we have co-located water resource recovery facilities, which are basically wastewater treatment plants with the heating system, with data centers. Turns out most of the water that you put down your drain is hot and has a bunch of heat in it because it's coming from your dishwasher or your laundry machine or your shower. So you can extract that water and you can use it to heat the city. In terms of architecture, I would say these are kind of neutral conceptual renderings. We are still doing the work on figuring out exactly where we're going to land on the spectrum between traditional and modern, so I wouldn't take them as being too literal. Our suspicion is that we're going to end up on the simpler side of traditional architecture and the more timeless part of modern, but definitely big emphasis on human scale and warm materials that you often don't see in modern developments. In conclusion, I think California needs a win. I think California needs a symbol of abundance. I think it needs a symbol that it's pretty serious about all of this. It needs a anti-high-speed rail, and we think that California Forever can be that. It sits at this intersection of all of the things that we're trying to do as a state: housing, energy, manufacturing, shipbuilding, and we think it's a huge opportunity for the state to reclaim the leadership on a national scale and be able to say that and kind of look at something and say, we did it. We think it's pretty hard to show that California is back and that it can do things by saying, hey, we built X thousand units of housing. That's a really, really important step. But at some point, you need a symbol. High-speed rail is a symbol because people can imagine what it looks like or doesn't look like. And so we are optimistic that California Forever will be that. Thank you very much.